I remember the first morning I sat in that new house with a hot cup of coffee, sunlight streaming through the curtains, and my phone buzzing with alerts from the security cameras I had just installed. On the screen, I watched my daughter-in-law standing at my front door, fumbling with a key she should never have had. She twisted it once, twice, then pressed her ear against the door like she expected it to give in. When it didn't, she moved to the back entrance, trying again, her face hardening in frustration. It was a surreal moment. To sit inside, calm and steady, watching her scheme unravel in real time. That was the day I knew the truth. The people I trusted most were willing to cross every line to get what they wanted. But before you can understand why I had locks changed and cameras installed, you need to know how it all began. Not long before that morning, I was a very different woman. I was 63, newly widowed after more than 4 decades with my husband. Losing him was like losing the ground beneath my feet. Even the little routines, his morning whistle in the kitchen, the way he wound his watch before bed, were suddenly gone, and the silence in the house pressed against me in a way that was almost unbearable. In those early weeks, my son Kevin and his wife Rebecca seemed to be a lifeline. They showed up often, checking in, bringing dinner, asking about my health. They held my hand in those awkward silences when I didn't know what to do with myself. To me, it looked like care, concern, maybe even love. But looking back, I can see it more clearly now. Their interest wasn't in me, it was in what I represented. A widow with an inheritance, vulnerable and unsure. Rebecca especially had a way of tilting her head and speaking softly, as if she knew exactly what my late husband would want me to do. She told me I needed something fresh, something that would give me purpose again. Kevin echoed her words, nodding in agreement, reminding me that stability was important at my age. It sounded comforting at the time, like they wanted what was best for me. I was raw, grieving, and desperately wanted to believe that my family's attention was genuine. But there's a certain unease that grows in your chest when someone else is steering your choices too quickly. I felt it whenever Rebecca's eyes lingered too long on my insurance paperwork, whenever Kevin asked about the payout with just a little too much enthusiasm. I brushed it off then, telling myself I was being paranoid. What I didn't realize was that my heartache had made me easy to read and easier to manipulate. Still, I wasn't as naive as they thought. Somewhere deep down, I knew I couldn't hand over my future to anyone else. And so, quietly, without a word to them, I started forming a plan that would change everything and one they would never see coming. The first time I saw the mansion, it felt as though the house itself exhaled and welcomed me in. A tall Victorian with a wraparound porch that looked like it had hosted 100 summers of lemonade and laughter. Its gables reached proudly toward the sky, and the stained glass windows shimmered with afternoon light like they were holding secrets from another century. The garden was overgrown but eager, as if it had been waiting for someone with the patience to bring it back to life. When I stepped inside, the air carried that faint scent of wood and polish, mixed with time itself. The hardwood floors creaked gently underfoot, but it wasn't a tired sound. It was more like the house was speaking to me, reminding me it had endured through years, storms, and families before mine. The kitchen stopped me cold. Bright windows overlooking the yard, counters wide enough for rolling dough, and space for the kind of long, noisy meals I used to dream about when my grandchildren visited. I could see Tyler sitting at the counter with homework spread out, Rebecca fussing with holiday decorations, Kevin laughing as he carved a turkey. That was the picture in my mind. Clear as day, a home, not just for me, but for all of us. A place where I might feel whole again, surrounded by family instead of silence. After losing Henry, I wanted something that gave me hope for the future instead of just memories of the past. This house felt like the vessel that could hold that hope. The decision to buy it came quickly, though I pretended to deliberate. I used the life insurance money, placed the deed under a trust, and hired a management company to handle the contractors. For 6 weeks, I watched from a careful distance as new paint brightened the walls. The kitchen gleamed with fresh countertops, and the garden shed its weeds for roses. Every step was a quiet promise to myself that life wasn't over yet. It was simply changing shape. Still, I told no one. Not Kevin. Not Rebecca. Not even my closest friend. Something deep inside me warned against it. Rebecca's eyes always sharpened when the subject of money came up, as though generosity was simply a resource to be mined. I convinced myself that keeping the purchase secret was part of the surprise I wanted to give them, but the truth was more complicated. It was also a way of protecting my joy from being questioned or redirected before it even had a chance to breathe. I imagined their faces when I finally revealed it. Kevin, astonished and touched, realizing his family would have space to grow. Rebecca, perhaps softened by the gesture, her sharp edges melting into gratitude. I told myself this gift might heal the distance I sometimes felt between us. And so I waited, holding on to the secret with equal parts excitement and caution, counting the days until I could open the door, lead them inside, and tell them what I had done. At that time, I believed it would be the beginning of something beautiful. I had no idea it would be the start of everything unraveling. The morning I set out to finally reveal the house, my chest was buzzing with anticipation. For weeks, I had guarded the secret like a treasure, picturing the moment I would open the front door and usher Kevin and Rebecca inside. I imagined their surprise, the way Kevin's face might soften, the way Rebecca might clasp her hands together in gratitude. I believed, perhaps foolishly, that this home would knit us closer as a family. But the moment I pulled up to the curb, that beautiful image shattered. Rebecca was already on the front lawn, her phone pressed to her ear, gesturing as though she were some proud homeowner showing off her new estate. Kevin stood beside her with a tape measure, moving along the windows as though he had plans already drawn. My heart sank so quickly I could almost hear it. I didn't step out of the car right away. Instead, I sat there across the street, staring. They weren't just browsing, they were claiming. Every gesture, every glance, every note scribbled in Kevin's little pad spoke of possession, of certainty that this house belonged to them. And when I finally joined them, their words confirmed it. They spoke of the master bedroom with glowing eyes, of the kitchen as if Rebecca had already decided what curtains to hang. And then, as casually as someone assigning seats at a table, Rebecca turned to me and mentioned that I could have the small bedroom near the guest bath. Adequate, she called it. Just enough. It was as though all those weeks of envisioning holiday dinners and grandchildren's laughter had been erased in an instant. My sanctuary, the space I had built in my mind as a gift of love, was being re-scripted into their dream home, with me shoved into the margins. And then Rebecca went further. She brought up Henry. She said he would have wanted me to use the money wisely, to invest in their future, to think of the family's needs before my own. She invoked his name like a weapon, weaving his memory into her argument as if it could compel me to surrender my judgment. I stood there listening, the sting sharp and unrelenting. The man I had loved and lost was being used as leverage to pry open my wallet and secure their claim. It was cruel in a way that left me cold. I didn't protest, not out loud. Inside, I was boiling, but I knew if I lashed out in that moment, they would only double down, only twist my emotions tighter. So I nodded, smiled faintly, and said that I needed to think about it overnight. That night, as I sat alone in my own home, the papers of ownership tucked safely in a drawer, I turned their words over in my head. They didn't see me as the woman who had built a life with Henry, who had worked and saved and planned. To them, I was an old widow with a checkbook, someone to be managed and tucked away while they enjoyed the spoils. It hurt, more than I can explain. But it also clarified things. If I wanted the truth of their intentions, I couldn't confront them yet. I needed to watch, to listen, to let them show me how far they were willing to go. And so, I went to bed with the decision already made. Tomorrow, I would act as though I was still considering. In reality, I was preparing to uncover the full extent of their manipulations. The very next morning, Kevin called me sounding urgent, almost breathless. He said another family was circling the mansion, that an offer might be placed that very day. He painted the situation as if time itself was slipping through our fingers, as if I needed to act immediately or lose everything. He insisted that the only way to secure the house for all of us was to pay the full price, upfront cash. On the surface, I murmured polite concern, but inside, I felt an icy calm settle over me. This was not the gentle encouragement of a son. This was pressure, a carefully orchestrated push meant to drive me into a corner. And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. That afternoon, I called the property management company and had them relist the house. Same price, same terms. I told them to act as if an earlier offer had fallen through. If Kevin or Rebecca pushed me, I wanted to see just how far they'd go. Then I hired a locksmith. Every lock on that mansion was changed within hours. The sound of the drill biting into metal was, oddly, reassuring, like a wall going up around my peace of mind. The next call was to a security company. By nightfall, cameras were installed at every entrance and throughout the main rooms. For the first time since Henry's passing, I felt the stirrings of control, of quiet strength returning to me. The payoff came faster than I expected. At dawn the next morning, my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I opened the feed, and there she was, Rebecca, standing at my front door with a key in hand. She twisted it several times, her frustration growing as the lock refused to yield. She stepped back, muttered something to herself, and stalked around to the back door to try again. The camera caught every angle, the tightness in her jaw, the impatience in her stride. I sat in the living room, coffee in hand, watching her as if it were some grim performance staged just for me. My daughter-in-law was trying to enter a house she had no right to, using a key she should never have possessed. Later that morning, Kevin called again. His voice carried that careful tone, trying to sound calm, but edged with unease. He said Rebecca had noticed something strange, that maybe squatters or vandals had gotten into the property, that perhaps the locks had been tampered with. I let him finish, then told him plainly I had changed the locks. The silence on the other end was thick, stretched long. Finally, he asked why, his voice tight, and I told him, steady and measured, that I had done it to protect my home. My home, the house I had bought with my money. The house that bore my name on the deed. The house I had watched them circle like vultures. There was a small, choking sound on the line, as though the truth had caught in his throat. It was the sound of their entire scheme beginning to unravel. But even as satisfaction warmed me, I knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning. I had caught them in a lie. Yes, but a lie this bold usually hides something deeper, and I intended to find out just how far they were willing to go. When I thought I had finally seen the full extent of Rebecca's schemes, more came to light, each revelation worse than the last. My lawyer called me one afternoon after I had asked him to review the chain of transactions around the purchase. His tone was calm but deliberate, the kind of voice people use when they know they're about to deliver a blow. He told me that when the bank had called to verify the wire transfer for the house, it wasn't me they had spoken to. It was Rebecca. She had answered my phone, pretending to be me. She claimed to have financial power of attorney, something I had never granted. The bank accepted her word at face value and released details she should never have known. That was how she discovered the house had been purchased, weeks before I had any intention of telling them. The pit in my stomach deepened. It wasn't just lies and manipulation anymore, it was impersonation. It was fraud. As I sat there with the receiver pressed to my ear, I realized Rebecca hadn't simply stumbled into temptation. She had been plotting, quietly building a long-term plan to take control of everything. My lawyer warned me that if I hadn't been cautious, if I had allowed her just a little more influence, I might have signed papers without realizing they stripped me of ownership entirely. She wasn't just trying to squeeze money out of me, she was aiming to transfer the house, and all the equity tied to it, directly into their hands. I remember sitting at my dining table, staring at the deed, feeling my pulse in my throat. Outrage warred with sorrow. This was my son's wife, the woman I had welcomed into the family, who had called me mom once upon a time. And now, I had to face the fact that she saw me not as family, but as an obstacle standing between her and a fortune. Just when I thought I had steeled myself enough to confront them, Kevin called again. This time, his words carried a heavier weight. He said Rebecca was pregnant. The news dropped like a stone in my chest. For a fleeting moment, I felt joy after all. A new grandchild is a blessing, but almost as quickly, suspicion crept in. He was presenting the pregnancy as if it were another bargaining chip, something to soften me, to push me closer to handing over the house for their growing family. He spoke of stress and morning sickness, of how Rebecca needed a stable, larger home for the baby, how the mansion was perfect for raising a child. Each phrase was another twist of the knife, turning something sacred into leverage. I admit, for a moment I faltered. I pictured holding a newborn, smelling that powdery softness, feeling Henry's absence a little less keen with new life in the family. But then I thought of the cameras, of Rebecca with that stolen key, of my lawyer's voice explaining how close I had come to losing everything. The pregnancy might be real, but so was the manipulation. That night, I sat in the quiet of my living room, the glow of the security monitor casting long shadows across the floor. My heart ached with conflicting emotions, longing for family, grief for what had been broken, and fury for how brazenly my trust had been abused. But under it all was a firm resolve. I could not allow guilt, or even the innocence of an unborn child, to become the wedge that stripped me of my dignity and my security. I would not cave, not now, not ever. If they wanted a fight, I was prepared. This time, I would not be the one caught off guard. When Rebecca finally showed up at my door, she looked nothing like the confident woman who once paraded around my porch, pretending to be its owner. Her face was pale, her shoulders hunched, and her voice trembled as she asked if we could talk. Against my better judgment, I let her in. She sat stiffly on the edge of my sofa, wringing her hands. Then it came spilling out. She admitted that she and Kevin were drowning financially, that the rent was behind, that her pride had kept her from asking for help outright. She confessed that she thought if she could make me believe it was my idea to hand over the house, I would feel good about it instead of resentful. She insisted it had been about protecting me from guilt, about sparing me from feeling burdened by my own generosity. I listened quietly, my jaw set, the anger rising but controlled. When she finished, I told her what I had come to realize: this wasn't love, this wasn't care, this was manipulation. And not just manipulation, it was elder abuse. Using my grief, my vulnerability, even my late husband's memory, to twist me into giving up what I had earned was not noble. It was exploitation. She flinched at the words, but I pressed on. I told her I would never again allow her to decide what I could or couldn't handle. I had survived loss. I had survived loneliness, and I could survive without her schemes. Later, my lawyer confirmed something chilling. This wasn't Rebecca's first attempt at such tactics. Years earlier, her own grandmother had signed over her home under suspiciously similar circumstances, coaxed into believing it was for the family's good, assured it was only temporary, until the papers left her with nothing. The pattern was unmistakable. This wasn't an accident of poor judgment. It was a learned behavior, passed down and perfected. Oddly enough, learning that gave me clarity. Rebecca's choices weren't my fault, and they weren't mine to fix. My responsibility was to protect myself, to draw the kind of boundaries that could not be crossed. And so, that's what I did. In the months that followed, I poured myself into the mansion not for Kevin and Rebecca, but for me. I hosted dinners with neighbors who had welcomed me with genuine kindness, who brought flowers to my porch and laughter into my dining room. I joined a book club across the street, planted roses with the young family next door, and began to feel something I hadn't in years: community. Kevin, to his credit, began calling me each Sunday. His voice was quieter, less assured, but more honest. He apologized more than once, and while I knew it would take time to rebuild trust, I let him take those first steps. I did meet my granddaughter, a sweet little girl with her father's eyes. I held her gently, careful to keep my heart open to her, while my boundaries stayed firm with her mother. Looking back, I see now that the real victory wasn't in catching Rebecca with a stolen key or proving her lies. The victory was in choosing myself, in refusing to let manipulation write the rest of my story. Sometimes, protecting yourself is the bravest gift you can give, and sometimes, it's the only way forward. So if you're listening to my story, I want to leave you with this: guard your peace, set your boundaries, and don't let guilt or fear convince you to surrender what you've worked for. Your voice, your story, your worth, they matter. If you've ever faced something similar, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Share it, because you never know who might need to hear it. And if my story spoke to you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support helps these voices be heard.